everybody. I'm Las Vegas Cris, LVC, and I'm here with Ron from Ace Sports and Ted Sobel. We are going to try something different here. This may be the only time we do it. Maybe it's the first of many, but here, and it's my show. It's my idea, because what I was talking about was a concept with some other people about this and that. And I started to think about it, and I came up with some ideas of my own. And what I want to do is I want to hit up Ron and I want to hit up Ted. They don't even know what we're going to talk about. So it could be a crash and burn, or it could be something good. But let's see what happens. I want to ask both of you guys, as far as sports betting goes, how important really is it to watch the games? How important is it to you to determine who you're going to be betting versus looking at stats and data and just reading things in general?
You want to go,
Ron,
or you want me to go?
I'll go first, Ron, because you are the regular gambler. I am the previous regular gambler. To me, it depends on the week. If it's a Sunday and I know that's a specific game that I want to watch, but I also love the action on it, then that changes. It doesn't change the bet, but it changes maybe how much I want to get into the game. If you're only betting just to watch, then it's for fun and it doesn't matter. But if it's something you're serious about and you're putting some major bucks on a game, you better not be doing it just because I really want to watch this game. So I think it depends on how much action you have that day. Does that make sense?
Well, no. Maybe I misspoke. What I'm trying to find out is how much is watching the games important to determine who you're going to bet. Like, do you need to watch the games to really get a good pulse on the teams?
No, I don't need to. To me, again, it's more about the enjoyment of watching the game, and if you got action, it's even more fun. So I do like that a lot, but it's not going to affect what I do. I don't need to watch a game that I'm betting on.
Do you watch all the games, Ron?
I watch the games because I'm a fan of football, the NFL and the college. So I'm watching as much as I can. I take off an occasional Sunday night, but on Saturdays I'm watching in the afternoon, and I'm watching on the Red Zone channel. But it doesn't influence the bet, and I don't need to. I'll usually watch a good game, the best game that I can find, and it's probably not a game that I even have action on. For player props, when I'm making player props, I do want to see what kinds of decisions the coaches are making, and it will carry over to a subsequent decision that I might make the next week or so on when I see game strategy. But games as a whole, I watch whatever game that I want to watch, regardless of what I'm playing, and I'm not going to glean anything more than what I get out of the stat sheet, play by play, or anything else.
Yeah, and what everyone should know too, Cris, is my job is to watch every single game. Okay, so it has zero to do with betting at all. I have to watch I have to literally write down every score of every game on a sheet in front of me, because when they throw it to me on Sports USA, let's go to the scoreboard update in Los Angeles. Ted Sobel is there. I got to know what the hell's going on. So I'm watching every game.
And one of these days on one of those updates, we'd like to say, "Oh, Ron's not going to like this score." I know he's.
Yeah, you should, absolutely. You should. But Cris, you can relate to this, because I'm sure you're doing the same. If you're watching, you're multitasking at the same time. I'm recording data and stats and getting ready for the next week, changing power ratings, stuff like that. So I'm watching kind of with one eye and the other, and my hand's writing, because I'm gathering stuff from the NCAA football while I'm watching the NFL.
I always like to say the comment, I don't think Ted's heard this one, Ron has, is don't believe your lying eyes. I think that it's really important to not believe your lying eyes when it comes to handicapping, when you're talking about betting the games. So with that in mind, how do we remove the bias from stat evaluations? Do either of you guys have any problems with that, where you're looking at betting a game and, boy, it's really hard to bet against those Kansas City Chiefs? How do you get that out of your head?
Okay. Let me go first on this one. One of the things is because we're trying to trust our numbers. This is something you've talked about before, Cris, as well. If your head says one thing, but the numbers say another thing, but you've been doing this long enough, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, you're going to trust the numbers. I'm going to trust my power ratings first. And if something's way off, I'm not just going to go on the other side because somebody threw a pretty pass or, wow, these guys got out coached by these guys or something like that. I'm going to look at the numbers first. And then it just becomes part of experience. To get rid of that recency factor, it's something that you have to train. It's part of the principles of being successful or trying to be successful at handicapping. You have to take what you get and remember it's just a snapshot and it's one thing and it's one sample size. And all of sports handicapping is based on return of investment over a long period of time, a large sample size.
I think one of the great ways to compare this is to a coach on the sideline. He's got those numbers in front of him, right? And do these numbers tell me I should be doing this? Not necessarily, even though a lot of guys want to go with those numbers no matter what. You got to have a feel for the game. You got to trust your feel for the game. And a lot of times that's the difference between a great coach and just another guy. So to me, that's the same thing when you're betting. You got to trust your numbers. And if you don't, then you don't make a play or you make it very small. You got to know what feels right. It's more than guts. It's a combination of what your gut says and what the numbers say.
So that leads me to my next question. Is there a future in blind stat analysis? No player names, no team names. So it just came to my head how I would like to have stats available to me to be able to look at a box score and whoever scored the touchdown, whoever made the pass, whatever the team was, I don't want to know it. I want to dissect a box score. I want to look at the weekly stats, and I don't want to know the names of the teams. I don't want to know the names of the players. I want to be able to look at the stats and the box scores and to make an evaluation blindly. I want to make an assessment of these teams without having any sort of bias or anything floating around in my head. What do you guys think of that?
Well, I am looking at red zone targets because certain quarterbacks, certain teams are going to throw to their tight end more in the red zone. They're not going to use their running backs. They're not going to run. All of a sudden, they become pass happy inside the 10-yard line. They're going to throw the fade. Some teams hate the fade. So I'm looking at tendencies. I don't really care about the names. I'm looking at the tendencies, but part of the tendencies can be the names. If you always throw to your number one receiver, I'll take you back to the Baltimore-San Francisco Super Bowl when San Francisco was trying to catch up and they had 4 downs inside the 10-yard line. Every single play was a pass to Crabtree. They didn't go to anybody else for 4 straight downs. So I'm looking at those kinds of tendencies.
2 T's, trust and tendencies, real important words there. Do you trust your feelings on something, whether you know the team or not? And how about if you don't know the tendency of that specific team, or the numbers mean that much? Because tendencies are very important. So it's like, oh, that number might just be a number because that team tends to do something differently, and you know it. So I think you got to try. You got to juggle both. I don't see one without the other.
Those are excellent points, and frankly, I didn't weigh them as much as I'm glad you brought that up. That's why I like this blind topic, so to speak, because I was coming in at it from a different angle of just trying to get a starting point with teams, and then obviously, if you're starting off with blind stats, you're going to eventually look at the real stats. And you're going to put together more of a storyline and see, oh, okay, well, now this kind of makes some sense. But it might draw your attention away from some things that you were expecting.
Right.
Which kind of puts me into the next. This is probably more for Ron because Ron dissects the box scores more. But if you were able to look, if you didn't know a score on Sunday, don't you think it'd be kind of neat? Like if you didn't watch any of the games, and somebody fed you the box scores on Sunday night and you looked at each of the box scores, how good of a job do you think you could do by looking at a box score and matching them up with the final scores in the games?
Never tried that. I think I'll try that based on this impromptu conversation. I think I'd come very close. And key stats would be how many running attempts they had versus the other team and what the turnover ratio was. Those would be the key stats. Maybe you throw in penalties if it's a very big difference, like 50 versus 120 or something.
Yeah, so you'd know the Raider game right off the bat.
Yeah.
And the bad special teams, you'd know are the Chargers.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
Yeah,
would that be is that an exercise in futility, or is that a handicapping exercise that would challenge you and actually be useful in any way, or am I just in a dream world of just trying to think too far outside the box?
I think you could back test it. And in the back testing, you could probably tell which teams relied on the run more when they were ahead versus when they were not ahead. You could probably look at some tendencies of what teams did during to arrive at that particular box score. I don't think you can use it week. I mean, I don't know. This is a new topic for me, but I don't know if I could use it week to week. But I could probably get some information out of it over a 6-week span, an 8-week span, to learn more about what that team's doing well and what that team may not be doing well.
Again, it doesn't matter who the coaches are, because in this case, maybe it's a one-time thing, but if it's Pete Carroll versus Sean McVay, you got two different mindsets from a different universe, right? And maybe that one game, Pete Carroll is doing stuff sort of Sean McVay-like, but he's not going to do it on a regular basis, and it's impossible to compare because it's not going to happen on a regular basis.
It might be more of a college thing because colleges tend to keep their tendencies a little bit longer. There's more mismatches at the line of scrimmage. There's more weight disparity at the line of scrimmage. Some teams have to pass because they can't protect as well. So you might be able to glean things more in the college game in this particular scenario than the NFL game.
Would you ever find the use, let's just say a major website had a little option to remove names and team names from their box scores? Would you ever find the need to ever check in on them and just for any sort of evaluation purposes at all, or it's just too much of a novelty, like sort of like the WFL?
I'd try it, see what happens. I mean, because of the pandemic and not going on vacation and doing other things and so on, I back tested the Ivy League, which I hadn't been involved in for 30 years since it became limited and some books didn't carry it and so on and so forth. And so you could back test a lot of these things, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. And the Ivy League still had some interesting scenarios where you could play on it.
Yeah, doesn't consistency mean everything though? Because if it's not consistent, how can you trust the numbers? How can you trust that it's going to continue on? So there's got to be some kind of consistency there. And that's where I say so much of that comes back to what team is it and what are their tendencies? I think that's really important. I don't know.
But, it doesn't. See, that's why I asked Ron the question of if you had the little toggle switch to remove player names and team names, I could compile my data. I'd love to look at my data week 8, and not even there's no team names, but my data comes out and I've got my hardcore end numbers for each team, and there's just a number associated with each team. I think it would be a lot more interesting to evaluate those and throw them against the current week's point spread on the blind, technically, to look at it blindly before I actually looked at it with the team names.
I think you may be onto something for a couple of scenarios. I'll give you the scenario where the bye week in Philadelphia. We talked about this in our first podcast, I believe. Philadelphia ran the ball 22 times on average their first 6 games, had the bye week, and then they ran between 38 and 39 times on average the rest of the way. If you start seeing, if you're charting Philadelphia, but you have no names whatsoever, and all of a sudden you're seeing almost twice as many running attempts after their bye week, then you're onto something. They're a different team. They made changes and adjustments, like Ted said.
Well, very good then. This is a short topic, experiment. I don't know what kind of value can be gleaned on it, but what I'd like to do as often as possible is just throw some crap out there and see what sticks to the wall.
I love it.
Because it's really important to be constantly evolving as a bettor. You always have to be adjusting. The game is ever changing, and if you ever do have an edge, you lose that edge at some point. That's why you always need to be thinking in different ways and trying to find different edges. As you mentioned, you stopped doing the Ivy League. You have to tweak, you have to make changes. And sometimes you'll come up with some dumb ideas and sometimes you come up with some great ideas.
By the way, I think this is a great opportunity for the viewers to send in their comments on that if they have something that we want to talk about, because in a million years we may never think about it, and maybe it'll put on a whole new light bulb for something. You never know.
Yeah, I'd love for people to comment on this and to say, what topic do you want us to discuss? Because we come from 3 different perspectives, and I think we could, I think it would help us too, not only
Sure.
those who are watching this. So I have one in mind now that Cris has started that up, but I'm not going to tell him.
Oh, it's going to be another.
Oh, would I do that to you? I want to thank everybody for joining us, and we'll come up with some more programming. We'll try to come up with some fast, short, original topics as often as we can. For Ron and Ted, thanks for joining us.